Classical music is coming back. At least, that's what I've been noticing recently. Many of my friends who previously didn't listen to classical music now listen to it on a regular basis, and many of the friends that I've met since I moved to Los Angeles do the same. It's an interesting time to be a fan of the genre, so I thought I'd make a video unpacking why this shift is happening and what it could mean for us. First off, we need to make sure that it's not just me and classical music is actually coming back. Oh. I'll spare you the research montage, but it turns out that classical music is most definitely on the way up. And it's not just famous pieces from the 18th century either. Modern composers are sharing the spotlight with legends like Vivaldi, Mozart, and Bach. It's difficult to understand why this shift is happening, but I'll speculate on a few key points that I think have had a large part in bringing about the return of classical music. The performance, the emotion and storytelling, and the sense of beauty and belonging. We'll start with the performance. Most medium to large-scale modern concerts look like this. A few band members spread across a massive stage, lights, lasers, pyrotechnics, massive line arrays and subwoofer stacks that can reach up to and over 130 decibels. I've been to a few of these before and they were all fantastic experiences, but in a way, they were also frightening. I always had to make sure that my concert earplugs were inserted correctly. I always had to make sure that I wasn't in anyone's way on the floor. This is a difficult one, I'm 6 feet tall. And I also had to make sure that my phone and wallet were always secure in the crowd. Compare this with a medium-scale classical concert. The LA Philharmonic often plays here, at the Walt Disney Concert Hall. This venue seats nearly 2,300 people, and yet the LA Philharmonic plays completely unamplified, resulting in a far more honest and accurate reproduction of the performance. I can go to these concerts without needing earplugs, and since the audience is entirely seated, I don't have to worry about being in anyone's way. And since we're not packed into a tight space, the venue stays at room temperature and I can wear what I want to the show. The ticket price of these shows might also have an effect on our listening habits. With the cost of living rising dramatically and wages not necessarily keeping up, the number of people who can afford $347 to go see Morgan Wallen is starting to drop. Compare this with the LA Philharmonic. Tickets to the LA Phil at the previously mentioned Walt Disney Concert Hall can go for as little as $20. When I went to go see their Tchaikovsky show at the Hollywood Bowl, the bus that I took to get to the bowl was almost 10% of the entire show price, and the buses here are not expensive. I can definitely see the appeal of modern concerts, especially to people who thrive in large crowds of people. To me though, since I'm more of an introvert, I prefer concerts where the listening level gives me a little space to think, and where the ticket price isn't most of my monthly budget. Next, we'll look at emotion and storytelling. This aspect is a lot more subjective than the performance aspect, but I think it's still worth mentioning. Humans are curious creatures, and most of us love a good story. We'll sit down for an entire day with a good book. We'll go to the movies, read magazines, journal, and tell our own stories just because we want to. This extends into the type of music that we consume. Those of us who enjoy being told stories might gravitate towards modern rock or pop music, the lyrics of which often tell a short story in every song. We enjoy this not only because it gives us a window into the writer's mind, but it also gives us a lens through which we can see our own lives, our struggles and hardships, and our good times. Classical music, of course, is also written with a story or a scene in mind. Let's take Debussy's Afternoon of the Faun as an example. It's inspired by a work of the same name from a French poet, and it's about a faun waking up from his afternoon nap and remembering all of the encounters he had with several nymphs the previous morning. It's pretty graphic. Knowing this, the piece takes on a similar role to modern lyrical music, in a way that it tells a predetermined story. But unlike modern music, if we don't worry about what the composer is trying to tell us, We can let our imagination run wild and use the music to tell a brand new storyline. So what about emotion? There's less to be said here than with storytelling, but the main difference that I've noticed is that modern music seems to be pretty one-dimensional in this aspect. Each song is meant to convey a single emotion, or to explain a certain event or feeling. Classical music, on the other hand, especially with longer pieces, will often tell each story from the beginning. And they take us on a roller coaster ride of emotions, often through multiple movements. I realize that this is a little bit cheaty. I know that albums exist and that their entire point is to tell a story from start to finish. But with the amount of emphasis that the industry puts on single releases these days, I feel that this argument still has merit. A good example of this is Tchaikovsky's Piano Concerto No. 1. For this metric, it really depends on the listener and what sort of storytelling and emotional content they want to hear. I often don't have the mental or emotional capacity at the moment to listen to classical music, so instead I'll put on a playlist of indie pop or rock music. I'm not saying that classical music should overtake our collective psyche. I'm just analyzing some of the reasons why we might prefer it to some of the music that has. The beauty and sense of place of classical music is something that I feel is far less subjective and has much more to do with society as a whole. And it's the main reason why I initially felt drawn to this genre of music. Imagine it's the late 1800s. You live in an apartment in the city and your parents are away. You decide to go knock on your friends' doors and go exploring. You all gather and walk down the street, in between the horse-drawn carriages and streetcars. You're surrounded by beautiful classical architecture that draws your eye and fills you and your friends with a sense of wonder. In one of the shop windows, you see a poster advertising a brand new symphony playing later that evening. You and your friends are broke, so you can't afford to go to the show. But still, before the show starts, you all gather at the fence outside the opera house, hoping to hear parts of what you know is going to be your new favorite piece. The snippets that you do hear are beautiful, even though they're quiet and distant. Now, imagine you just heard about the Taylor Swift concert at the Sophie Stadium in LA. You call your friends to see if they want to come, but half of them can't afford tickets. On the day of the concert, you leave your apartment in the city and are surrounded by this. You're still in a very populated area, but the architecture is bland, the sidewalks are cramped and narrow, and even though you're in one of the biggest cities in America, the nearest transit stop is a 15-minute walk from your front door. You spend an hour sitting on the bus, then cross 2 massive parking lots to get to your destination. Once you're there, you stand in line for half an hour to get your ticket checked, and then they finally let you into the stadium. The point I'm trying to make here is that classical music can take us into a more visually beautiful and human-centric place, especially for those of us who have never had the chance to live in such an area. It can remind us that there's a little bit of magic wherever we go, no matter what our living situation is, where we come from, or who we are. Thanks for watching. If you like this new type of video, consider subscribing. I don't know what sort of upload schedule I'll be able to hold myself to with these videos, but I feel that I have things to say, so I'll try to keep a somewhat consistent schedule moving forward. Stay curious, and I'll see you next time.